It is hard to follow. So, thank you for having me. Thank you, Joshua, for being my therapist. Because when your community first approached me and I felt the mission and the vision of your community, the question that I had for myself was, what could I offer? And I struggled with that. And so it actually gives me joy to hear both Sparla and Janae and feel those voices completely present so that it gives me permission to share my voice. And I will talk about what I think I'm struggling with in this world at this time. And that is the practice of integrity. And how the practice of integrity is a practice to awaken together. And so whenever I look for a topic to talk about, I go into, I try and find the roots of it, and this is, limited to the English language, I know, but I look at that word integrity and it goes back and it means, as opposed to some highfalutin vision, what I found is that it means wholeness. And it reminds me that the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. But it's important for the parts to be together. It's important for the fragments to hold together regardless of external conditions. And how do we do that? So I want to talk about, as I explore this, 3 levels of integrity that I am exploring with myself. The integrity of the person, the integrity of the path, and the integrity of the planet. So you can see the trajectory where it goes. And really this integrity of our person is what is being lived in this community, what is even in Shireen's beautiful introduction of what would it take for all of us to be here, not just individually in terms of coming into the room, but what would it take for all of us to bring all of our component parts, everything that we have lived, because that's what our life is. It's the accumulation of the 10,000 joys and the 10,000 sorrows, the successes and the absolute failures that we've had that make us who we are today. And what would it take to allow all of that into this space? Because there are so many conditions that are causing us to repress, deny, suppress aspects of ourselves, to leave parts of ourselves outside the door in order to be present. This aspect of, sort of socially sanctioned exclusion. That these messages that are given to us, regardless of who we are, that say you have to think a certain way, you have to look a certain way, you have to be a certain way. And we begin to internalize, I know that I begin to internalize those messages. And that internalization of external oppression becomes the self-judgment, self-criticism, the self-hatred that prevents me from being here, even though I'm physically here. The second guessing of, do I have anything to say to this community? that's part of it. But to be able for me to name it is beginning to dispel it. It begins to disempower the internalized. They talk about wise speech in Buddhist practice. The most important things we say in the world are what we say to ourselves. There are these, so for me, this practice of awareness has been to shatter those internal glass ceilings of this inadequacy, those self-limiting thoughts. And as a gay person of color, I have felt multiple levels of that intersection of self-doubt, self-criticism. When I was growing up, we lived in an all-white neighborhood. It was difficult to be a kid of color. And I had this thought that if it's this difficult to be a person of color in the world, I am never going to be gay. I had that thought, and I had that reality. Oh, I'm not going to go there. That's not where life takes you, of course. Who could we be and what could we do if we were never separated from that inherent goodness? That wholesomeness, that wholeness that each of us have the capacity to bring into a space, regardless of the adversities that we live through. What is the life that we could live, not just individually, but what could we do together if we were to be able to give ourselves that permission? When we are not distracted by the external messages of telling us to look a certain way, or be a certain way, or think a certain way. So I'm going to read a passage from the great spiritual teacher, Margaret Cho. If you are a woman, if you are a person of color, if you are gay, lesbian, bisexual, or transgender, if you are a person of size, if you are a person of intelligence, if you're a person of integrity, then you are considered a minority in this world. It's going to be really hard to find messages of self-love and support anywhere, especially in the women's and gay men's culture. It's all about what you have to look like, or else you're worthless. When you look in a mirror and you think, oh, I'm so fat, I'm so old, I'm so ugly. Don't you know that's not your authentic self? But that is billions upon billions of dollars of advertising, magazines, movies, billboards, all geared to make you feel shitty about yourself so that you will take your hard-earned money and spend it on some turnaround cream that does not turn around shit. When you don't have self-esteem, you will hesitate before you do anything in your life. You will hesitate before you go for the job you really want to go for. You will hesitate to ask for a raise. You will hesitate to report a rape. You will hesitate to defend yourself when you are discriminated against because of your race, sexuality, size, gender. You will hesitate to vote. You will hesitate to dream. For us to have self-esteem is truly an act of revolution. That is the integrity of a person. And as we align continually to who we align our intentions of being in the world with our actions. So in James 2:17, I love it when faith traditions sort of cross and, really say the same thing. Thus, also, faith by itself, if it does not have works, is dead. Intentions without actions is dead. We align who we are with our actions in the world. This is the learning curve. This is the feedback loop that mindfulness invites us into. It is not about just sitting passively and noticing the world as it goes by, because we are part of the world. So when we talk about integrity and ethics and the practice of non-harming, that is the lowest bar, non-harming. But when you really look at the polar opposite of harm, it is really the practice of goodness, kindness, love, virtue. And that's not Larry that's talking. That's Webster's. The fruition of ethical behavior in the world, the fruition of the actions of integrity has to be love. So this journey doesn't just incorporate mindfulness, because we can be mindful of anything. We can be mindful if our intention is to cause harm. We can be very mindful of that. And, you know, in a technological world in which I have less contact with you, when it's a screen and not us in together, it's so easy to forget the relationship. It's so easy to cause harm and not take responsibility for it. There were studies in the 60s and 70s that if people were aware of the consequences of their actions, they're more likely to learn, and there's a higher probability of not causing that harm again. But recent studies indicate is that we might not feel so bad at creating harm if we can get away with it. Unless we feel the consequences of those actions. That's the moral barometer of integrity. So C.S. Lewis wrote, integrity is doing the right thing when no one is watching. How do we practice that over and over again? Because this conditioning to get away, more is better, to get away with more is better in this culture, that's the market economy that's talking to us. That's the upstreamness of what we're addressing. So just to tell you a consequence of this action, so my mother is turning 102 next month. And she is, many of you know, she's a bundle of joy and caregiving. And she lives in a facility. And she still, in terms of keeping her mind alive, takes care of these orchids that are just phenomenal. I mean, orchids thrive with her. And she puts it out on her front door, and every now and then, one disappears. It's not the staff, because the staff will receive consequences. These are people that are 90 and 100 years old. This is the conditioning. Unless we we work on it now. When she goes to sign up for the bus to take her to the doctor's or whatever it is, which she still does, there's a sign-up sheet, and there's only a certain number of slots. And she will go up there, and she will find that her name is crossed off, and someone else's name is put on there. This is how deep the conditioning is, unless we start working on ourselves now. And it's hard because it's messy. It's not a light switch, I have integrity or I don't. Life, especially with our intersectionality, is much more complex than that. So someone even from the Harvard Business School wrote, "Many people focus on keeping their word, but one needs to consider how to maintain one's integrity when one cannot keep one's word, because life is that complicated." So for my own practice, this is, I tell you, that I've been exploring, and so I've come up with this. I used to be a clinical social worker, and I'm in recovery myself, so I call it my harm reduction loving kindness practice. Of course, I strive to be open and loving and caring in this moment. But if I cannot be loving in this moment, may I be kind. If I cannot be kind, may I be non-judgmental. If I cannot be non-judgmental, may I not cause harm. You see where I'm going? Because sometimes I cannot not cause harm. May I cause the least harm possible. And even in my failure, even in my limitations, still my North Star I'm pointing towards. I haven't lost the vision, the memory of who I know myself to be. Life is not a simplistic experience. And so just expanding from C.S. Lewis's phrase, integrity is doing the wise and compassionate action when no one agrees with us. Integrity is being kind when everyone around you is not kind. Integrity is loving when we ourselves do not feel loved. Integrity is placing a higher value on the greater good of all, rather than the gain of an individual or selected individual groups. It's not a personal practice. And that's why I segue into the practice of integrity in our world, in the planet. Because our spiritual practice is not about our personal sense of enlightenment or freedom. We never live this life alone. The integrity of this practice invites us to use our experience, to feel the experience of others, to go beyond just our personal lives, to include greater and greater beings around us. We may not be able to go totality, but again, where is that North Star that we're inclined to. That is the cross-cultural, cross-spiritual definition for me of unconditional. As was alluded to, I think in the introduction, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King's beautifully articulated phrase, I can never be what I ought to be until you are what you ought to be. And you cannot ever be what you ought to be until I am what I ought to be. This is the interrelated structure of reality. This integrity or wholeness of our collective experience, what is that? Except consciousness. Collective consciousness. You know, when Jung wrote about the collective unconscious, he never wrote about the collective consciousness. Isn't that interesting? This practice raises us from the collective unconsciousness. What is that except civilization? This is rising together. This is the capacity to walk together and support each other into these moments of freedom, these moments of insight, these moments of kindness. Creating the safety of belonging, the permission to bring in all of who I am, including all of the insecurities that I live with on a day-to-day basis. You're going to live with too. So that all of us can feel safe enough. And we know that there is no space in the world that's 100% safe. We know that. So how do we co-create a space that is safe enough? Because safety is not an individual matter. It is not my responsibility to feel safe in order to walk into a room. Issues of physical challenges and disability are not just about accommodating individual needs of people with different ranges of experience. It is an issue for all of us. Sexism and violence to women is not the responsibility of women to heal from. It is the responsibility for all of us to resolve. Homophobia and transphobia does not just involve the queer community. Anti-racism and multicultural work is not just the issue of people of color and their allies. It requires what Reverend Dr. King said, a shift in consciousness from all of us. The capacity to civilize ourselves. And he wrote, as you press for justice, be sure to move with dignity and discipline, using only the instruments of love. We can work to change our lives because we hate our failures, our insecurities, our imperfections, where we have yet to go. Or we can transform our lives because out of whatever adversity that we have lived, we have created this beautiful life. This gift that is so precious. These are two different attitudes. And likewise, in our actions in the world, we can change the world because we hate the injustice. We cannot abide by the harm that is being caused, enraged by the unfairness, and feel the urgency of all of that. Or we we can be inspired to change the world because we care for it so deeply. We are in love not just with the possibilities, but with who we are. One can support and sustain our path unconditionally, and the other can lead us to pretty immediate burnout. It allows us to create justice through just means. Because the creation of justice through unjust means is not justice. Even 2,600 years ago, in the time of the Buddha, which is the tradition that I come from, he recognized that a profound level and root cause of social injustice and inequality is not economic or social disparity. It is a question of ethical integrity. Only in an ethical, wholesome society that holds integrity as a value can justice flourish. And that ethical transformation begins right here with each of us. So I just want to connect the dots in reverse. The integrity of the planet, holding the most difficult, frustrating situations, including all the intersectionalities of our race and gender and orientation and class and ability, creating that space that we can thrive. To the integrity of the path, aligning our actions and our aspirations, that North Star of how we live and manifest a life in this world, starts with the integrity of who we are, of the person. Being authentic to who you are with all your successes and failures, not needing to judge anything, but having that aspiration to go beyond any limitation. Please make no mistake, it's all one practice of integrity, awakening together, being with each other right here and right now. So thank you for your practice of integrity. And just before we shift, I have 2 minutes. Just go inward and feel your energy. Allow yourself to ground in your body, in the sounds of the room, in the vibration, whether it's the words that have been spoken, the music that has been shared, feeling the breath. And as you feel the inhale, as you feel the energy of the breath that feeds the energy of your life, see if it's possible to expand that awareness to the person around you. And beyond that, to the orchestration of breaths in different cadences, different rhythms, different depths. A room breathing together. All of who we are present. This is what the earth is doing right now, breathing together. And all this exercise is a very gentle